Part 2. I Want to Drive a Car. From the story Lost Spring. Stories of Stolen Childhood. In today's class, we shall begin the second part of the lesson Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood by Jung. The second part, which is given in this chapter, is titled as I Want to Drive a Car, and the main protagonist of this story is Mukesh, who belongs to a family of bangle makers in Firozabad, which is famous for making glass bangles. Every other family in Firozabad is engaged in the profession of bangle making, but Mukesh wants to do something else. He wants to become a motor mechanic and learn to drive a car. He was determined to be his own master. Mukesh, just like Sahib, who is the protagonist of the first part, titled Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garage, Mukesh, like Sahib, denied the opportunity of schooling and forced to labor early in life. The plight of Mukesh and his family is beautifully portrayed through this story. This is another realistic tale of grinding poverty, the never-ending poverty, and a tradition that condemns thousands of people to a life of utter poverty. This part of the chapter tells us the story of poor bangle makers in Firozabad. As we move on with the story, we will find out, though Mukesh belongs to a family of bangle makers in Firozabad, yet he wishes to become a motor mechanic. So, let us start the story to know more about Mukesh. Mukesh wants to be his own master. Sahib is no longer his own master, were the words that ended the part 1. Here the writer begins the story, the second part of the story. Mukesh insists on being his own master. Part 1 ends with Sahib losing his freedom, while in striking contrast, Part 2 begins with the notable confidence of Mukesh when he says, I will learn to drive a car. The title of the story, I Want to Drive a Car, are the words that speaks clearly about Mukesh's optimism. Here, Mukesh insisted on being his own master. Mukesh has a dream in his eyes. I'll be a motor mechanic, he announces. He aspired to become a motor mechanic. The narrator asks Mukesh if he knows anything about cars. I will learn to drive a car, he answers, looking straight into my eyes. Looking straight into my eyes means to look with confidence and determination. Mukesh is determined to do something, so when he answers, I will learn to drive a car, he looks straight into the narrator's eyes. Mukesh very confidently answers that he will learn to drive a car. Here, we can point out the difference between the narrator's interaction with Sahib in the beginning of part 1 and her interaction with Mukesh in the beginning of part 2. In part 1, when she asks Sahib, why do you do this? He just mutters that he doesn't know anything other than rag picking. He just mutters, not announces like Mukesh. Sahib in the first part looks away as he does not have the confidence to look into the eyes of the narrator and reply. He doesn't have dreams like Mukesh. Sahib just accepted his fate, but Mukesh shows confidence when replies to the narrator and tells her looking straight into her eyes that he wanted to become a motor mechanic. He also knew that his life is not very conducive because being born in a poor bangle making family, it will definitely not be easy to reach his goal. But his confidence is something really admirable that makes him different from Sahib. At the same time, we should also notice that Mukesh also knows his limitation. He doesn't say, I want to own a car. He just says, I want to become a motor mechanic and learn to drive a car, not to own a car. It's really sad that these children become maturer much early in life due to their helpless circumstances in which they are unknowingly trapped in. With the burden of life, these children eventually lost their spring, that is, their childhood. The narrator feels that his dreams looms like a mirage a- amidst the dust of the streets that fill his town Firozabad, famous for its bangle. Now, amidst means in the middle of, and looms means appears. And why the mirage has been used here? Mirage means an optical illusion. It's an illusion or something that seems to be true from a distance, but in reality it is not so. For example, like in a desert areas, one could see the ups and downs of the desert layers as you can see it in the picture. The ups and downs of the desert layers, and from a distance it appears like a pool of water. If you see it from a distance, it will appear like a pool of water. But when you go closer and closer, you find out that there is no water over there. So that is a mirage. That seems to be true, but in reality, it is not so. Literally, it is used to describe a hope or a wish that has no chance of being achieved. Mukesh dreams of becoming a motor mechanic and learning to drive a car. All his dreams seem to be an illusion in the middle of the dusty streets of Firozabad, where every family, every person living there is a bangle maker. Here, the narrator tries to convey that although Mukesh believes that his dream of becoming a motor mechanic and learning to drive a car will be fulfilled in the future, but the narrator feels that it is just like a mirage because she somehow knows that Mukesh's dream will never be fulfilled. It seems like a dream that has no chance of being achieved. Why? Because every family in the town of Firozabad is involved in the glass bangle industry, making glass bangles. So, with the passage of time, Mukesh would eventually do the same thing like the other people do in Firozabad. He will also follow the same path like other bangle makers. Mukesh's dream was far away from reality, and although the boy was confident, but with the passage of time, he would give in to the societal pressure, the pressure that put by the society, as he belongs to an underprivileged and impoverished class, and also the tradition will also force him to do the same thing like other people do in the Firozabad, that is, bangle making. So, all his dreams look like a mirage. From a distance, it looks that it will be fulfilled, but when you go closer to achieve it, it suddenly disappears. It suddenly becomes very hard to fulfill those dreams. That is why it feels that his dreams appears like a mirage in middle of the dust streets that fill the town of Firozabad. The living condition in Firozabad. Now the narrator transports us to Firozabad, the world of Mukesh, and the difficulties faced by the people working in the glass bangle making industry. Mukesh lives in Firozabad, which is the center of glass making industry. It is famous for making glasses. It is famous for glass bangles. Every other family in Firozabad is engaged in making bangles, glass bangles. From generation to generation, every family in Firozabad have spent their lives working around furnaces. Furnaces, which is an enclosed structure in which heat is produced. In furnaces, the heat is very, very high as it requires very high temperature to melt glass, and they also weld glasses. Weld glasses mean join glass by heating. As you know, once the bangle is rolled, it need to be joined by heating it and making glasses in great numbers. So every other family in Firozabad from generation to generation has been working around those furnaces, welding glasses and making bangles in great number. They make so many bangles that it seems that they have made bangles for all women in India. Bangles made here are supplied to every place in the world. These bangle makers have not been able to raise their standard, and bangle making is like a tradition that has been carried on from generation, and the children ahead somehow engaged in the same thing. They will only make bangles. It seems that they are destined to it. Mukesh family is also one of the families who has worked in the bangle making industry for generations. Bangle making is not confined to adults only. All the children in Firozabad work alongside with their parents in difficult conditions. Mukesh and the other children work in dark, dingy, closed rooms with no windows and outlets for fresh air or light. They work near the glass furnaces that has high temperatures. Glasses are melted in the furnace with high temperature by rotating a rod. Welding glasses and making bangles. Mukesh and other children, along with their parents, work very hard throughout the day in the glass furnaces with high temperature. Sometimes they often become blind before they become adults because their eyes are more adjusted to the dark room, dingy rooms that are closed, that have no windows at all, and they work in front of those glass furnaces with high temperature, and their eyes are more adjusted to the dark than to the light outside. And also due to the small pieces, as you can see, while welding, some small pieces of dust flies, and those small pieces of dust of glass which goes into their eyes while polishing their which polishing while polishing the glass bangles, that harm their eyesight and they become blind before they become adults. They lose their eyesight, they lose the brightness of their eyes. They spend all their daylight hours working in glass furnaces with high temperature. Now we can imagine how pathetic their condition is. These people, the adults, did not know that it is unlawful to make the children work in the Bengal factory under such dangerous conditions. They do not have the knowledge that child labor is unlawful and prohibited in our country. They do not know that it is illegal for these small children to sit in those heated, dingy rooms in such a high temperature because the furnaces are burning, the candles and flames are burning, which makes those rooms extremely hot, and children sit along with their elders in front of those glass furnaces. Nearly 20,000 children are employed in the glass bangle making industry illegally. If the laws are strictly enforced and are strictly followed here, it would rescue almost 20,000 children from these inhuman places where they are forced to work, and the lives of their children could be saved from the hot furnaces where they spent long hours. The children could be prevented from becoming blind at a very young age. Now we'll see what happened when Mukesh took the narrator to his house, what she observes as she goes to Mukesh House. Mukesh's eyes sparkle with enthusiasm, means he's very happy when he takes the narrator to his home. He is happy as he volunteers her to his house. He also informs her proudly that his home is being rebuilt, means some renovation has been done. They walk down the narrow streets, means Mukesh and the narrator walk down the narrow lane, walk down the lanes. Lanes means narrow roads of Firozabad that are filled with garbage. Bad smell comes from those lanes as it is filled with garbage, and the people are not conscious about their personal hygiene and cleanliness of the surroundings. While moving towards the Mukesh home, they pass broken down huts which were like hovels. Hovels means which are small and dirty houses that are not properly constructed. The walls of the houses are crumbling walls, which is about to fall. Doors are shaking and unsteady, means wobbly, as they are not fitted properly. The houses have no windows, and the entire place is crowded with families and animals living together in the same place in a filthy environment, just like people used to live in ancient times with no signs of progress and development. Their living conditions are equally pathetic like the rag pickers of Shrimapuri. They reminded the writer of the prehistoric man who lived just like animals. The bangle makers of Firozabad make beautiful bangles and make everyone happy, but their own life is steeped in filth. Steeped means filled with filth and misery. Mukesh then stops in front of one such house, which also has a wobbly means unstable iron door, as it is not properly fitted. He hit the door hard with his foot and pushes it open. Now let us see what the narrator observes as she foot into the Mukesh house. In the pictures given in this slide, you can see how terrible their condition is, how they live. The lanes were very dirty, all are filled with garbage, and in that pathetic condition, the bangle makers live, who bring joy in other people's life. Mukesh House is a half-built shack. Shack means a roughly built hut. As the narrator enters the house, she saw that in one part the roof of the hut is covered with dead grass, and there is a firewood stove, and on it there is a large vessel where hot spinach leaves is being cooked by the Mukesh elder brother's wife. There are chopped vegetables which are kept in the large aluminium plates on the ground. She is very thin and looks very weak. She is a young woman. She is the daughter-in-law of the house who is preparing evening meal for the whole family. Her eyes are filled with smoke as she has been cooking food on the stove, but she smiles at the narrator as soon as she enters, or as soon as the young woman, she is the narrator. Although the woman is not very old by her age, but she is respected by all the family members as the daughter-in-law of the house. She is shouldered with responsibilities of taking care of three men of the family: her husband, Mukesh, and their father. You know, these families at a very young age, girls get married. At a very young age, they have to take all the family responsibilities. So, similarly, this woman also got married at a very tender age, and now she is taking responsibilities of the family members. When the older man comes to the house, she goes behind the crumbling walls and brings her veil closer to her face and covers her face behind her veil. Now, if you can see it in the picture, the women's face were covered with their saris, so that is the veil. This is the tradition that everybody follows, that daughter-in-laws have to cover their face before male elders. Now, when the father of her husband, means Mukesh father, came, who is the elder member of the family, has has come to the house, this young woman, the daughter-in-law of the house, does the same thing. She simply covers her face behind her veil. It is sad to see that people living in these remote areas are still socially and economically backward because there is no education. They all live in poverty. They do not have a proper house to live in. They might not have food to eat, but they were aware of those so-called traditions and they end up living a pathetic life. Mukesh Father is an impoverished bangle maker, means a very poor bangle maker. He is an old man and also looks very frail without any vitality and vigor, means he has no energy. He has worked hard all his life, first as a tailor and then as a bangle maker. But in spite of doing so much of hard labor for so many years, he has not been successful in renovating or maintaining his house properly. The houses still have crumbling walls and wobbly doors. He failed to provide a decent shelter to his family all these years and also failed to send his two sons, Mukesh and his elder brother, to school and has done nothing for their education. The only thing that he has managed to do is that he has handed over the great art of bangle making to them. He has only been successful in imparting to them the skill of how to make glass bangles. The children like Mukesh, who need to go to school and get education at this stage, end up being a bangle maker just like his father and his elder brother. He has lost his childhood in the midst of all this hardship. In the middle of all this hardship, he has somehow lost his he has lost the spring of his life.